You're listening to the Broadway Podcast Network.
I remember so many times I took pennies for a commission because I didn't think I was worth being paid more. Or the person who was commissioning me was threatening to go with someone who was a student who themselves did not have the built-in advocacy. It was somebody who was more experienced than me who said, you cannot undersell yourself. You cannot, because it affects all of us. You need to ask for what you're worth. The whole industry will benefit from you believing in yourself.
Hey everyone, welcome to Was It Chance, the podcast about embracing opportunity and taking intentional risk for creative success, your creative life. I don't know, I screwed that up and it's right in front of me, so I don't care.
Welcome to the first interview of 2024.
Maybe I'm a little starstruck. Anyway, welcome y'all. I'm Heather Vickery.
And I'm Alan Seals, and we are 1 year older-ish, relatively speaking. Listen in as we chat about other people, about the risks they put themselves. Wait, I messed it up too. Listen in as we chat with other successful people about the risks they've taken to put themselves on a path to creative success. Yeah, Heather, you have been texting me kind of nonstop starstruck about our guest today. Soup's excited, and I'm here to embarrass you because this is probably like, you know, this is your dream guest here. Who do we have?
Do you love the look? You guys should see Vanessa's face. You all, I am super excited because I have been a fan of this guest for a long time. And now, because social media is weird, now I'm like, oh, Venessa, she's just my friend. Which Vanessa's like, no, we're not.
Yes.
Let me introduce you to Venessa Vida Kelley. She is a Washington, D.C. based author, illustrator, and sequential artist. I first discovered her because of my fandom love affair with, there are so many on your list. Casey McQuiston, TJ Klune. There's a long list, but my listeners, my instant buys, Alexis Hall. Vanessa's work focuses on magical realism, fantasy, and culturally diverse romance. Y'all, that's such an important distinguisher and part of why I fell in love with these authors and with Vanessa's work. Like I said, she's been featured alongside the work of all of these incredible authors, in addition to the ones I mentioned, Everina Maxwell, Sofia Gonzalez. There's too many. Jennifer Weiner. The list is really long. And she was commissioned as the marketing campaign support for Amazon Studios' highly anticipated movie adaptation of Red, White, and Royal Blue. If you all have been around for longer than a second, you know that I'm fully obsessed with Red, White, and Royal Blue. All things Red, White, and Royal Blue, not just the movie. But you know what's really cool is that Vanessa's graphic novel debut is coming up. Am I going to get this name right? Manu Faces the Music?
Manu Faces the Music, that's right.
Manu, okay. And your first illustrated adult historical fiction novel, When the Tides Held the Moon, is coming out in 2025. So exciting to see you getting all of your own stuff out here. I'm excited, Venessa. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Welcome. Can I ask real quick what a sequential artist is?
Oh, so that is the hoity-toity word for a comic artist.
Like sequence.
Right.
Sequence in a timeline. Okay.
Yeah, so if you do webtoons, you do graphic novels, you work for Marvel, you're a sequential artist.
So you work for Marvel in any capacity and you're a sequential artist. Got it. All right. Need to work for Marvel. You got it.
That's a good question, though. I'll bet a lot of people don't know it, and it is the nice term. I actually am friends with, and I don't know that every comic artist, sequential artist knows each other. It's like being like, oh, I know somebody from Indianapolis, but Tana Ford.
I do too.
Who we are going to have on the show. Alan doesn't know that. Do you know Tana at all?
Me?
Vanessa?
Oh, I do not.
You don't. So
I will
Tana's
later.
the graphic artist that did Silk.
Oh, wow. Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
I'm going to tune in. That will surely be interesting.
So Tana's a sweetheart. And I just think it's cool. And in fact, from where I'm sitting, she did custom art. She turned all four of my daughters into superheroes.
Oh, how lovely.
Based on their personalities, and made me this beautiful custom art piece that's hanging right in front of me. So just
That's
random
amazing. Oh, how
comic
lovely.
conversation. I know.
Wait, so how, as an artist, then? Okay, first I want to go back to how did you become an artist? We're gonna get there. That's the given question. So file that away and start processing.
It feels like it's an obvious one.
That's an obvious one. We're gonna get there.
Okay.
But the big one, I want to jump ahead and then we'll circle back. Is when you're like, what kind of art should I do? Why sequential art? Why not, body painting in Times Square or statue making in Milan or something along, anything else?
Yeah, no, that's a great question because, well, my inroad to sequential art was movies and TV. And, when I was a kid, I wanted to be an animator such that I was like writing letters to my hero, Glenn Keane, and bizarrely he responded and like sent me like titles of books that I could read to like
so
get
cool.
myself spun up. Such a generous guy. I went in to, oh gosh, I'm going to wind up giving you the backstory regardless of whether that's
Yeah, this is great.
Yeah, just go there.
All right, here we go. So, when I was in like junior high and high school, I was on the path for like vocal performance and theater and stage. And, I grew up in New York. So, we had Broadway down, just a train ride away. And I had, those aspirations until I went to college as a vocal performance major and realized I didn't want to sing 8 hours of opera a day. So
you're going opera and okay.
Yeah,
wow.
It all just
that's
sort
a
of
lot.
like, maybe halfway during my sophomore year, I was like, I feel like we can take this and move it into the, minor field of studies. And I want to be an English major, but I don't just want to be an English major. They're offering at the University of Delaware this, film, this English major with a concentration in film. And so part of the instruction for that concentration involved deep diving into graphic novels and sequential art and just, teaching us the way our brains process certain imagery to be able to sort of spatially put together the blocking of a scene. And so, it all really sort of began there where I was studying story on, one side and then indulging in my art habit that I'd had since I was a kid, but was afraid to sort of like, really fully immerse myself in because, I was plenty distracted with other things. And I was also very scared of having people judge my art. So I kept it under wraps for most of my like kid and young adult life.
And so what were you drawing at that time though? Like what were you taking stories, like were you just going out proactively to find stories and then trying to get to sequence them? Is that the proper term?
Well, so I would say probably, going back further into like my history, I was a perennial fangirl from the very beginning. All of the stuff that I drew,
like original fan artist.
Like I was drawing all the golden era, Disney stuff. I was also like watching Bob Ross every day after school and like trying to create environments. And my dad was, at that time, he's sort of from a lost era of like blue collar New York, where he was a tool and die maker, which meant that he was constantly drawing machinery, but on the side he would be painting these seascapes. And so he had all of this stuff in like the garage, like art books and stuff like that. So I was getting a lot of input from all these different sources and just trying different things. And so it wasn't until I was studying English with that particular concentration that I was finally sort of like beginning to draw the threads together of the different things that I was good at and the different things that I was learning to, try and create sequential art. And really one of the first things I wound up doing with that particular skill set, I came out of grad school with a more advanced version of that degree, and started to be contracted to the various arms of the government that exist in this area. The first one being the Department of Defense, and I was in the recruiting, marketing, and advertising department of the Air National Guard, and storyboarding commercials.
Tell me you made the "We Want You" icon.
She wishes. I think it's older than Venessa Allen.
So much branding potential on that image now.
We want you.
Wasn't that like in World War II or something?
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. No, I just imagine, like, I joke around that one of those things that you see everywhere, if someone got royalties for that kind of thing, like every time it was printed, right? One of my professors in college, this is completely unrelated, but cool, was on the team on Intel that created the Control-Alt-Delete key sequence to reboot your PC.
Wow.
So I'm like, that was a question when he would introduce himself.
He doesn't get paid every time.
That's what he would say. Yeah, at the beginning of class, he's like, "Hi, I'm so and so. No, I don't get royalties."
Oh,
anyway, Department of Defense. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So it was early 2000s when I started working at the Guard Bureau, and at that time I got this like big blanket sort of header like job description, which was marketing media specialist, which is just like government speak for, we're going to make you do the job of 5 people, but there's only one of you.
Anytime you get specialist at the end.
Exactly. Yeah. So at the same time as I am coming up with like scripts for like radio spots and commercials and stuff like that, I'm also drawing, like storyboarding out the commercials. And then I'm going out and procuring the aircraft for the commercials. It was just like, it was probably the most bananas decade of my life, because obviously at that time we were ramping up the war. And by the time I left, we switched gears, and it was all about marketing towards service members and their families. Here are your reintegration services. Here are family programs to help you, with, PTSD, et cetera, et cetera. So it was
interesting.
It was a fascinating time.
You never think about that element of marketing in the military, in the government. I mean, at least I don't. You clearly do, but...
Well, and, it's weird because if I look at all of the professions that I've had and where I'm at now and where I'm going, and, from the outside, it really doesn't look like it makes any sense. Like it's just like, wait, you want to tell me that you worked for the military? But so bizarrely, though, being in that seat exposed me to so many different personalities. And and it was a sobering experience, especially, onwards after maybe 2007 or so, where, now I'm talking to people who've been there and done that, and the atrocities they've seen and the way they are trying to, usually these were like upper tier officers, stuff like that. Just hearing how they were trying to uplift their own, people gives you very interesting sort of perspective on purpose and office relationships and all that sort of thing. It's very, very, it's making its way into the work that I'm doing now, bizarrely enough.
I bet. Now I'm going to see it. Like when I read your books, I'm going to be like, oh, I see that. I know where that is.
Yeah.
So while you were doing that, were you creating fan art for yourself at the same time? Is it something that you just kind of always kept doing?
Well, so at the times when the job got very stressful and, in particular, like I had been with the government in various capacities over the course of maybe 4 administrations, I think. So I got to see, a variety of different leadership go in and out, and see how, the top brass would assume a particular philosophy and how that philosophy would trickle down and affect the rest of us. And so, things got hairy. I
can only imagine.
I'll leave it to you all to decide whether or not this sort of
I'm not
treads
sure
into...
what year you left working with the government.
Oh my God. Well, there have always been times where I'm just sort of like, where does my heart lie in this? Especially during wartime, especially when it was, the gutting of civil service and all of that sort of thing. That was really, kind of traumatic for those of us who, don't change over with a new leader.
Yep, I can only imagine.
And so it's in those times that I would resort to like, okay, I'm just going to read something fun and light and just escape for a bit. And then, that's where, I'd pick up the pencil and just be like, oh, I feel like they look kind of like this. Character designs would emerge in my sketchbooks. And,
so then what was there a flip, or was it gradual, or sort of like an all of a sudden your work got noticed when someone was like, oh, I'm going to hire you to do this. I want to make sure that you're going to take your sequencing talent and apply it to our project that's not in the military. Like, how did that transition happen?
Okay. Wow. All right. So,
and quickly, like this show was all about intentional risk and like putting yourself out there. And I know that there's got to be something in that.
I think that perfectly sums up the transition. It was I was reading Carry On by Rainbow Rowell, and I had a very sort of clear image in my head of the main characters for that. And just after not sharing my artwork publicly for a very, very, very long time, at least not with my name attached, I was like, all right, well, I'm just gonna put this on Twitter and see. Just, if there's anybody else out there who's read this book, because really that was the driving force of it, is like, really enjoyed this reading experience. Is there anybody else out there who's read it? And it felt like sort of like
with fandom.
Yeah. So, I fired my signal, and that night the author found the image and shared it to her platform. And I remember within hours of that happening, I just my phone just kept on going off, and I was like, what the hell's happening? I opened it up and I was like, oh, holy Moses, this image is getting shared all over the place, and it was engagement unlike anything I'd ever experienced before. There's a big old serotonin hit when that sort of thing happens, and so it's just instant encouragement. It's like, well, if you liked that one, here's how I envisioned this scene.
We're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned for more of the episode. And now we're back.
At that point, people were responding with feedback like, you plucked these images out of my head. This is exactly what I saw as I was reading it.
Oh, cool.
That is so cool. And as a reader of some of the same books, I'm like, yep. Oh, yes. That's amazing. What a skill.
Well, and I think that the film background really assists in that capacity, where, when I'm reading a passage and I am envisioning what it would look like on paper, I'm usually passing it through the filmic filter of, this is the lighting, this is the, I'd put the key over here and the, and block it as an over the shoulder, whatever. And so I think that might have helped with the reach of some of my artwork, in that, yes, it was fan art, but it wasn't typical fan art in that it wasn't just, a sort of standard poster type thing of the characters. It was, you're in the scene, you're watching it like you would a movie.
I would say that's distinguishable about your work, is that it does look like it was moving, like you captured a photograph of something moving, which is incredibly cool. And we have seen how that can turn into something moving, right? Your work, and what that looks like perhaps when it's inspired other art versus both ways. So, it's such a gift, though.
Oh, thank you.
To be able to do that. And fandom, I mean, that's where it's at, right? Like, I am, as we have already established, deep into the Red, White, and Royal Blue fandom. A little in Alexis Hall's fandom-ish. I mean, I love their books, but I haven't gone deep. But I also, TJ Klune just like blows my mind. And so some of these other authors that you've mentioned, I haven't read. So now I'm going to have to go and read them. But the people who feel passion for it, to the level that you feel passion that makes you want to create the art, like that's a whole underbelly community.
Oh yeah.
If you don't know about it, you don't know.
Well, underbelly is a good way of putting it, but I mean, especially in like the Broadway world, right? You have these cons and like people send their fan art, they draw their fan art, create their fan art, and send it to the theaters, and the actors post it up on their walls and post it also social media, and even like some people draw, some people costume design some of the costumes that people have recreated. Like, I actually went to the Museum of Broadway the other day, and somebody's replica, I think, of Jenny Anidots. It's a homemade costume that is so identical to the original. They have it in the museum on display.
Well, and it's
fan art that somebody made.
And I wish there were a better word. Obviously, fan art is legitimate. Like, there are
it's an homage.
Yeah, and it makes the IP a participatory experience. When people draw fan art, when they there are people out there who have created their own R2D2s because they know that you can't find the original anywhere, and they have constructed exact replicas that then wind up becoming part of J.J. Abrams. Like, like that relationship between the property and the people who consume the property is like, I'm kind of surprised that it's taken this long for studios and the property owners to really see the benefit in encouraging that kind of engagement.
Absolutely. Well, I was going to just ask you about that, because I've been a reader for a really long time, and I do feel like the level with which art, and so we can take it from the term fan art, which is its own wonderful thing, but into, I have hired this artist and commissioned this artist to create art that comes with my book. And Casey comes to mind. Casey McQuiston comes to mind. Didn't do it for Red, White, and Royal Blue, because obviously that was a debut novel, and no one, especially Casey, expected it to do what it did. But with their second book, One Last Stop, there was all sorts of art. I don't think you did the One Last Stop art, did you?
Not for the special edition, but I have drawn some scenes. Yeah.
Okay. I'll have to go and search it all out. But in general, it came with it. Like, here is the art. Here are prints or buttons or, bookmarks or whatever. So, capitalizing on all of that in the launch phase before you can even get your hands on the book. And I think that comes from fan art, like the idea, people really want this.
Yeah. People want to own a piece of the story and put it up on their wall. Yeah.
It's funny how people's brains work differently, because some people, you can read a book, like a book with no pictures, a novel, one might say. Yeah. And then you're I just made up that word. And they imagine in their head what these characters look like. And then there's the people who turn that into, they want to draw the people. They want to see what the people look like. And then there's, like I was saying, people make the costumes. And then even at these cons, Dragon Con and Comic Con and all these other cons where it's comic books and video games, go to the cosplay, you have engineers who are making semi-realistic working versions of these gigantic suits and lights and weapons. Obviously the weapons aren't, they don't fire, but you people are like, well, I want to see how this is going to work in the real world. And they're pulling this fantasy, whether, sci-fi or fantasy, I use as a term, for sort of like dragons and fire breathing stuff, right? Right. So fantasy lore, sci-fi, time travel, all this stuff. It's fascinating to me how different people pull out, I guess, the part of the IP, like you were saying. It's the IP, the idea, the story that speaks to them. And some people want to draw landscapes. They draw these giant landscapes of every realm. And it's interesting that we're talking about this because, like, my older son turned 9 recently, and I'm trying to get him to understand, like, when he's watching movies or playing a game or something, like, when I want him to look at the credits and say, look at everything that goes into making this seemingly, this little animation that you just watched that happened to be an hour and a half long.
Yeah.
And so there's
it's really important everybody get their credit.
The credits. Well, it's just, especially for a video game or for
anything,
for a movie, for anything that's not live action, you look at the additional animators, right? So there's a whole team of people that does landscapes and a whole team of people that does background animation and like the NPCs. There's a whole team that does NPCs. There's a whole team that does your primary characters that you can play. There's modelers, there's costumers, there's 3D model your digital artifacts so that then your animators can go in and draw them.
Yeah.
And it's the process. It's so impressive. Obviously, this gets me excited.
I know you're excited.
It's bananas if you really stop to think about it. I had the benefit of seeing the trio of Mexican directors, Alfonso Cuarón, Guillermo del Toro, and Iñárritu. The three of them were giving a talk in some random corner of New York City, and I went to hear them talk about their philosophy on directing. And they were talking about how being a director is very much like holding the tip of a pencil being held by 300 people.
Ha.
And I was like, what a great metaphor for what that whole experience is like. My experience with, TV and film is relatively limited, but I'm lucky to have friends and colleagues who are in the business. I have a friend who is himself a filmmaker, but right now he's doing lighting for Kung Fu Panda 4. And that's just his job.
Nice.
He's just doing the lighting.
Yeah,
and
lighting in the animation. There's lighting.
Like there is a lighting department. And, it reminds me of watching, I am a special features addict. If there is something on Blu-ray, I'm going to watch the behind the scenes because I need to know. Yeah, I live for that stuff. Oh my God.
I love the behind the scenes. And me too.
I was watching that big documentary, The Making of Avatar, where James Cameron was talking about how, kind of sad he was that his costume department wasn't recognized because everything was CG'd. He's like, but they really made these costumes. They had all of the materials. We had actors try them on. Everything was hand sewn, beaded, the whole 9 yards.
Oh, wow.
These are artisans who came in and did this. And then we scanned it into our computers and turned it into, the animations that you saw. And nowadays we, when we talk about animated films, we talk about them in the context of the voice actors who portray all of these people. But at the end of the day, really, the actors are the animators. They're the ones who are making faces in the mirror to be able to
absolutely
make that person look weirded out or, panicked or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so Venessa, I am so curious. We started on it, and then in true Was It Chance fashion, we weaved around into a bunch of really random places. But
was it chance?
Was it chance or was it just ADHD? I'm not sure, but
that's the unofficial tagline.
There's manifestation and there's just distraction.
Was it chance? What were we talking about?
No, but so you did this first piece that was fan art and it went viral. And I'd love to hear, how do you go from that to, so we talked about creating art as part of book promotion. I know that you did post-release artwork for TJ Klune for Under the Whispering Door. So right. Yeah. Because that book's one of my top 5, and I read about 120 books a year. It's one of my top 5 all time
It's so
all-time
good.
books.
So
I
all
think
of
I
the
should read a
stuff
different 120 books.
Yeah.
I don't read the same one. Stop.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, no, but so that's just one thing. Like, I'm curious, how do we go from that to being the commissioned artist? And for those of you who can see, and I'll post a picture of myself with it when we share this episode, but right over my shoulder is the French version of Red, White, and Royal Blue, which again, anybody who's been hanging around me long enough knows I love the word fuck, and it's literally called My Dear Fucking Prince, which is amazing. But you did the cover art and the inner art, and like, how do we go from fan art going viral to working with these specific, and you're very specific about the authors that you have supported?
Yeah, I have tried to prioritize BIPOC and LGBTQ authors when it comes to like putting my signature on something.
Yeah.
So a couple of things, I guess, were at play in that transition for me. I mean, obviously, one of the things that an author is going to be thinking about is whether a relationship with a particular artist is going to help their own brand, is going to expand their reach, and, et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of my artwork gets driven by the idea of like, more people should be reading this because I really enjoyed it and it feels life-changing to me. And if I can throw some artwork behind it, then maybe more people will read it. That was what happened with Red, White, and Royal Blue, where the book was dropped into my lap because somebody knew I was working down the road from the White House at a time when things were quite thorny in the capital region. So
yesterday,
and so I just I put together the cake scene, and later on in conversations with Casey, they were like, it was the very first art I'd ever seen of anything I'd written. And when they were asked the question, who's going to illustrate the end papers for the special edition of Red, White, and Royal Blue, for Casey, it was, quote unquote, a no-brainer. Venessa's art was the very first time I felt like my book was legitimized by a broader audience. And that's kind of my motivation, is like, I want my artwork to lend that legitimacy to marginalized authors who don't usually get that help from the publishing world. I'm sure if you stumble onto Twitter, there's conversations happening all the time about how marketing dollars are not spent on authors of color or queer authors. Mm-hmm. You're just sort of, it's like, well, we threw you a bone by giving you a book deal, And I think, the sort of Cinderella story behind Red, White, and Royal Blue, it gets passed around, right? Like, oh, this book didn't have a traditional marketing campaign. Well, it did, because of one queer guy at the board table who was like, give this book to me. I don't want it to go direct to like ebook. We can put it in people's hands and see if it takes off. And so all of these things converge to sort of uplift this narrative that incidentally came out at the perfect time politically, culturally, and, here we are, watching Red, White, and Royal Blue get nominated for a GLAAD Award as a movie.
I know. I saw it today. I was so excited.
So it's like, there's power in the idea of having a story and putting images to it. There's something about the leap from written word to images that seems to elevate a particular story or property or whatever you want to call it. And so I sort of made it my weird codependent mission to throw my artwork behind the books that I loved, which is how I wound up doing a lot of artwork for The House in the Cerulean Sea, which then put me on TJ Klune's radar, and he reached out to my agent for pre-order artwork.
I love that. That artwork is beautiful. There's so much in that book. I couldn't draw anything. So when I see your work, I'm always like, oh man, to have that skill set. But I'm like everybody else who tells you it's like you pulled it from my head. Like it's so vibrant and visual. And I am fortunate when I read, I absolutely see a movie, 100%. And not everybody can do that.
Everyone, yeah.
And when I recall the things that I've read, it plays like a movie. And your art for House by the Cerulean Sea, absolutely. I'm like, oh, this is what I saw. And it's so spectacular.
That makes me so happy. Thank you. Yeah. So there was, I would say that between Casey and TJ, that was the real shift. That sort of brought me into the book artist space. So you get, in other words, that help from an external source. Where I would say manifestation came into play. My agent, who is actually a longtime friend before, she took a look at my graphic novel and was like, all right, I've been trying to talk myself out of representing you because I don't believe in representing my friends, but I don't trust anybody else with this book. So let's just do this. And I was like, okay, thanks. She, she always has her ear to the ground and being, she's a fantastic agent. She's literally like, what do they call from Jerry Maguire? Like, you're my ambassador, Quan, man. And so she's always, tapping in and, trying to get, her thumb on the pulse of what is motivating me. So she's like, so just going to throw this out there. Are you interested in doing book covers? And I was like, I think so. What needs to happen for that to happen? She's like, draw a book cover. And I was like, you mean like,
draw it,
just
they will buy
like,
it will go on books.
Yeah. She's like, yeah, just. So I did TJ Klune's The Extraordinaries. I just like, all right, I really loved this book. It's really cute. I feel like my style would lend itself well to a cover. And so I put that out there. And within the week, inquiries were coming in for cover art. Wow. So there is an element of, if you build it, they will come to, this thing where a lot of folks, especially once you've established yourself, in an online space and people are familiar with your style and your, sort of like your personality in terms of the books that you like to read, it will attract the work that will fulfill you. So,
have you ever designed a podcast logo?
I know. And could you redo ours? No, I'm kidding. It's not the same.
I have done logo design. I haven't done it in a while, but
it would actually be funny if it had us in it, Alan.
Yeah, it's the same as a book cover, just square.
I don't think we can afford Venessa. I'm just saying.
I mean,
I will say you probably could afford me. My schedule is my biggest obstacle these days, and even more so now that I lost a week to COVID.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, I don't know. We have to think about that. That could be really fun.
We're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned for more of the episode. And now we're back. I'm looking through your Instagram account right now.
Isn't it gorgeous?
So, yeah, V Kelley Art. Kelley. Yeah, it's how do you how you draw so good?
I'd love to know your process. I mean, it is amazing.
Is it all pencil? Is it pen and pencil sketches, or do you use a tablet? Like as someone who I want to get, again, this is the Blu-ray behind the scenes right now.
Yeah.
When you're drawing. When you're drawing, as they say,
do they say
like
that?
Yeah, like if you put it in the wash, then you draw. Yes.
Now you're from Baltimore. There you go.
There you go. So yeah, like, do you use a tablet? Like I'm a nerd, a tech. I will read any book if you give it to me on a tablet. I don't want to hold a book. I don't want to waste the paper. I want to take the whole internet with me in my pocket.
Oh, well, and I appreciate that you're interested in that side of it because I'm a geek and I like to talk about it too. So
good.
So most of the stuff that I do professionally is digital art, and a lot of the reason for that is it's fast and it doesn't take a lot of expensive resources to create in that capacity, because you've got the back button, you've got layers that you can toggle on and off and things like that. Whereas if you're doing all that sort of stuff in natural media, you're potentially going to go through reams of paper, and art supplies are expensive. But what I will say is I do tend to sketch things out and thumbnail out in pencil on paper, because that's where you get the sense of proportion, and you can do a straw man, for example, of a book cover, and it's going to be this size. So you don't want to go too granular with certain details, or you don't want to, you want it to look proportionate to the final output. So I'll often do a straw man or a mock-up, and then I'll scan it or take a photograph of it and bring it onto either my Cintiq Wacom tablet, which is this 21-inch monstrosity that you can't see because it's out of frame, or I'll do it on my my iPad Pro, which I often prefer, because when you got two kids and you gotta pick yourself up and go to the playground, but you still have a deadline tomorrow, you can just bring it with you.
You say that as well, I gotta hustle, but as a consumer and as a fan, I think it's very cool to imagine just seeing you at the playground, and then the next thing I know, I'm holding this book in my hand. I'm like, oh, that was just created when Venessa was at the playground. It's not a big deal.
Oh,
what?
All the kind of career pivots you've had, is there one that sort of stands out as the scariest, the least sound, the one that's what the actual fuck am I doing right now?
the least sound. So
I mean, leaving a government job, even though it did sound kind of I'm not okay. I won't.
That last boss
assume anything
of yours
about
was shit.
Oh my gosh.
Right.
Well, no. I will say, and that was probably the worst thing about leaving the government job for good. Because at the end there, I was working for the General Services Administration. I was working for a very benign branch that just deals in government acquisitions, and my team were so wonderful. I had my boss at that job was the best boss I'd ever had, because she was very family oriented, and just tied us all together. And she and I had the kind of work relationship where we would read each other's minds. And that's it was so hard to walk away from that, because I knew how valuable it was. I've been in the private sector long enough to know, I had struck gold with that job. And so leaving it was oh God, what am I doing? What if this fails? At that point, it was the graphic novel that had me in the, all right, here's your come to Jesus moment, Venessa. Can you literally keep this up and do both? And the answer was a clear no. Either I scrap the graphic novel or I do the job, and the graphic novel never gets made. And so lucky for me, I had that conversation with my supervisor, and she was like, Venessa, we want you to follow your dreams. This is amazing. And I was like, you're just the best. And the waterworks. But, there was real terror in that, because I am a quintessential Taurus. Give me the stability. Give me the stuff that I can expect, as far as routine, as far as just feeling I have a sense of control over my income and environment and things like that. That is something that you sacrifice as soon as you go full on into the freelance art world. But I am super grateful that there are other artists and other authors who are generous with their expertise. And that's why if there's an opportunity to mentor if someone shows up in my inbox and is I want to be able to do what you do. How did you make that happen? I'm going to answer all their questions, and I'm going to try and like share as much knowledge as I can, because I know that I would not be sitting here and a wall would be empty of books had I not had generous artists ahead of me being like, yeah, sure. If you never use this program, here are some tutorials, or here are some books, or, you should really check out this, live drawing class, or, whatever the case is. And
does it feel important to you to help young artists be able to learn this and stretch and take it as a serious career?
I'd say, yeah. Especially because, and this is my philosophy on all forms of like creative expression, like when you are capable of lifting up the sort of lowest rung, then the entire community gets raised up. And right now we're in this very odd time when our jobs are being threatened by AI. And the human element of creativity is being devalued. And I remember how, like, so many times I took pennies for a commission because I didn't think I was worth being paid more, or the person who was commissioning me was threatening to go with someone who was a student who themselves did not have the built-in advocacy. It was somebody who was more experienced than me who said, you cannot undersell yourself. You cannot, because it affects all of us. You need to ask for what you're worth. The whole industry will benefit from you believing in yourself. So
absolutely. Yeah, I love that. And I love this idea of be the ladder, right? Mm-hmm. Be part of, helping people up and doing all of that. As a coach, that's something I help people with all the time is, demand what you're worth. And if somebody doesn't want to pay you what you're worth, that's their choice. Mm-hmm. And you're not going to live in scarcity. The right people will pay you what you're worth to do it. And sometimes we make choices for passion. Sometimes we just believe in something and we're willing to do it for less than what we know we're worth because we want to be part of a project or, whatever it may be. But know why, know what you're choosing, know why you're choosing it, and be intentional about it.
Yeah, you don't want to be in like an emotional deficit from having given your talents to a particular project. Yeah.
Absolutely.
An emotional deficit. I like that.
It's a good term.
I like that term.
It comes from experience, I'm sorry to say.
Yeah. Well, and then sometimes when that happens, there's this process, you'd be curious to hear yours, but I know for me is like, okay, well, it happened and it's over. Now what do I want to do? There's no, I'm certified in NLP, and there's no failure in NLP. It's only feedback. There's only ever feedback, right? Mm-hmm, so if the feedback is, I learned this lesson, like, what do we want to do about it? How do you sort of handle, that emotional deficit that you talked about?
Yeah. I've come around to this idea of, blessing your mistakes. Because, I'm a human being. I haven't made all the right choices. And, there are certain paths I've taken that have steered me away from purpose and motivation. And, I can either look back on those things with, shame or like a sort of self-flagellating, perspective on it, or I can see the way it has woven itself into the tapestry of who I am right this very moment. And, I think part of the meandering of my professional life has taught me a lot about how even when in the moment I feel like I'm not doing the right thing, it will inform a future me. Like, my years spent in the military, like once I started drawing again, like there was a moment there where I was like, good God, how much further would I have been if I had really just discovered this about myself sooner, if I had paid for art school instead of, going into, just the English sort of analysis of it. There are things that in the moment when I've looked back on it didn't make sense. And I felt like I had wasted time. And I'm realizing now, sitting where I am with both the books that I'm writing, I'm like, oh my God, none of it was wasted time. The time I spent like singing opera 8 hours a day, that wasn't even wasted time. It's all coming into play because Manu Faces the Music is about a music producer. And so like all of these threads of experience are, when you are a creative person, like that's fodder, that's fuel that winds up, propelling your creative expression.
Well, that's a beautiful segue into, I wanted to ask you about your original work. So you have the graphic novel, Manu Faces the Music, and also an adult historical fiction novel. Like, so you're writing the whole novel? Like, I want to hear all about this. When the Tides Held the Moon. I've seen some of your early artwork. I don't know if it's early or ready artwork. I'm not sure. It looks very completed to me, but I know that this book isn't due to come out until 25. So I would love to hear about sort of the chance that has led to you finally embracing your own work and putting it out there, and what your process is like, and whatever ridiculous questions Alan has in the process.
Yeah.
I have no ridiculous questions. My questions are legit, focused, and important.
Oh, boy. Oh, well, yes, they are. They are. And I appreciate it.
Such a mom. You're important too, Alan.
Good job, sweetie.
Can you sing a version of Shut the Fuck Up, Alan? That's what I want to know.
Well, yeah. So both of these stories are an offshoot of like my own sort of identity excavation. It wasn't until I was in my mid-30s that I was, deprogrammed enough to admit that I was queer. And then, along with the question of, what does it mean that, this is how certain genders make me feel, and was the question of, my ethnic background. I'm half Puerto Rican and half Sicilian, but I was raised in a fully Puerto Rican household. We spoke Spanish. My grandparents lived with us, which meant, instead of getting in trouble 2 times, I'd get in trouble 4 times. But, when you are part of the diaspora, there's a constant push and pull of, am I Puerto Rican enough? Am I American enough? And voices on both sides that are like, no.
You're not anything enough.
Yeah.
That's what you're hearing.
Exactly. And so it has been, I think, like an accidental thing that I just started digging deeper into my own heritage and my lineage. Like, there are musicians all over my family. Like, my mom was a singer when she wasn't a nurse. My sister sings opera. My uncle was Elvis's drummer in the army. Like,
wow.
What?
Wow.
Sort of bananas.
Does he know if Elvis has still left the building?
No, there's a picture of the two of them on my
so
like
cool.
on my wall in my kitchen. But yeah, so I was like, I had that bug as a kid, and I left it for obvious reasons. But, there's something to the story of Puerto Rican music in New York. And that sort of led me down this rabbit hole. And then just the spirituality in my family, on that side of my family, seemed to lend itself to broader fantastical exploration. And so all of those things came together for Manu Faces the Music. Separately, I mean, when The Tides Held the Moon was literally like, it was that plus pandemic. Benny is my main character, and like many Puerto Ricans, because little known fact, Puerto Rico has the highest per capita rate of asthma in the world. And
that's so random.
And there is speculation that the reason for that is, this is part of the legacy of colonization and violence on the island.
Wow.
That has produced an entire race of people who can't breathe.
Chills. Wow.
So,
oof.
In the midst of the pandemic and my own anxiety over catching COVID and being one of the people not to make it because I have chronic asthma, as do many of the people in my family, I started to envision this kid who is basically my ancestor. He is descended of slaves and natives and Europeans, and as a result, he doesn't know who he is, and he knows even less so when he is forced to come to New York, seeking work, and yeah. So all of these stories are super personal and very, in some ways, like they align with a lot of the art and the stories that I already draw for. But at the same token, I think that they are very different in terms of telling untold stories. Like we think about Puerto Ricans who migrate from Puerto Rico to Manhattan. We usually think of the 1930s when that great migration happened, but actually it was happening way before then because of the Spanish-American War. And, at that point, Cubans and Puerto Ricans were very much planning their own sovereignty, and only one island got it. And so what happens to this other community that's sort of been ripped from its sister and forced to recover, and especially get just the way the timeline sort of played out, America took Puerto Rico, and then a major hurricane came and razed the island to the ground. They inherited a humanitarian crisis, basically. Here we are, present day, still feeling the repercussions of this history. And what's really interesting, I think, about writing a story that's set in the turn of the century is that there's so many parallels of, you got this one part of society really trying to hold the reins of traditionalism, while there are people who are headed towards the roaring 20s they want to be looser, they want to be freer, they're exploring their sexual identities and, interrogating their identities as well. So that was a very meandering answer.
No, I loved it. And I could tell Alan did. He got real quiet. It's actually when he's really the most lit up. It's fascinating, right? To research all of that and to learn about it and then to create something from it.
It's been
a question. I can see it.
The most fulfilling work I've done, for sure. I still adore being able to bring to life the worlds of other authors, because there's just so many brilliant people out there in the publishing world. But
how much of that now moving forward for you is going to be commissioned art versus I'm just moved, so I will create art? And
all of it.
Oh my God.
Well, and then if you're creating just for creating, is it for you, or is there still a compulsion to, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but is it something you want to share, or is it just something you want to do? Where does all of that?
Like a podcast logo, or what is it? What are you doing?
Alan really wants a podcast logo, Vanessa. I'm pretty sure we're going to talk about that.
Oh gosh. Well, you've touched upon the question that I have been asking myself a lot since the year changed over, because, both of the books that I'm writing are set to release in 2025, and they are both, what's so neat about Tides is that it's going to be an adult speculative historical fiction with illustrations.
I cannot wait. Literally have goosebumps.
Wait. Say that again. Adult Adult-oriented, speculative. Adult-oriented.
So when you were asking yourself about fantasy versus sci-fi versus all that, speculative is the branch term for all of that.
All of it.
So where's Harry Potter fall? Is that speculative?
You know what? That's a good question.
Or is it just magical realism?
Yeah, dumb it down for me.
I think Harry Potter is less speculative and more specifically fantasy, because I think the speculative element is much more closely tied to our real world, that there's like some commentary happening as well. So
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, so like for instance, House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J.
That was gonna be
Klune.
my question,
That is speculative fiction, even though there's a lot of fantasy elements in it, because at the heart of that story is a social commentary on being othered and, how that sort of trickles down to our youth and whatnot. So,
okay, sorry.
No, it's all good. What was I saying?
Well, what are you going to only do commissioned art? Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm realizing now that the universe is telling me that I need to take things literally like a day at a time. Because, look what happened when I thought I had my entire January plotted out, and then I caught COVID. And not only that, but then my editor caught COVID. And so the entire timeline for one of my books got completely shifted because of something I didn't account for or plan.
Oof.
And so the idea of am I going to do more commission work? Am I going to do less of it? I'm literally taking it on a sort of case by case basis. Right now, my list of priorities is finish laying out the graphic novel, because once the graphic novel is laid out, then I can finalize the cover art for the prose work, after which I will be delving into the editorial for the text, the manuscript of the prose novel. And this entire year is going to be we're doing graphic novel, then we're going to do the prose, and we're going to do the illustrations, and we're going to do and just hopping from one thing to the next in the most bananas way possible, because
maybe you're a manifesting generator in human design.
Oh gosh,
it'll try all sorts of different things. Yeah, that's my guess.
I feel like, as inflexible as I think I am by nature, I'm learning that I have to be more flexible and just be prepared to, when the email comes in, as it did this morning, I want to license one of your arts for a British version of a particular work, and it just needs a minor change. Are you available? Can we do this? And I have to sit there and be like, this was not on my list.
Well, how long does it take to do that then? If
and how much do you have to change
that?
If it's already created? Yeah.
So, the request is very early, but so it's taking an artwork that is from, you know what? I can actually show it. So it's from Jackie Kelley's novel, Something More. Jackie Kelley is a Canadian-Palestinian author. And she has created a book in which there's a little bit of a love triangle of sorts. So she had me draw her two the couples, the prospective couples, right? So we have guy number 1 and guy number 2. So we're going to take this picture and put guy number 1 in it.
Okay.
So
so just
a little tweak to something that's already finished. And I'm like, okay.
Change the angles of the triangle.
Yes, exactly. So it's not a huge lift, and it continues my relationship with Jackie, who's an amazing person. And so there's always going to be a sort of constant negotiation of, do I have the time? Do I have the energy? Do I feel like I can deliver a real benefit to the project? Because sometimes, a request comes in and I'm like, I don't know if I'm the right person for this particular task. I feel like what you're looking for is more of a, like a more graphical presentation than the painterly stuff that I do, or, so it's
I think that's important. I mean, I do that as a coach. Like the thing that you need, this person I know is probably better suited to do, and I would hope they would do the same for me. And you're not the right artist for every type of request. So it's important to know what's yours. And also it's okay to say no.
Yeah.
Like, I just don't have the capacity, even though if it's something you love, that's difficult to do, but that's exciting. I can't wait to see that. And also there's this, these are huge projects you're working on for yourself, but we all need to pay the bills too. There needs to be income.
Yeah.
So it's a lot to balance.
I'm fortunate that I have been able to establish like positive relationships with a lot of the authors that I've drawn for and their publishing companies. So I have an Etsy shop, and that's a nice sort of way to gain some passive income. And then I also have a Patreon, and I try to make sure that of all the things that I accomplish in a given month, I am doing something special for them that they alone get to enjoy. And that also helps sort of like cushion some of the feast and famine that I experience between projects. Yeah. I will say, like, having Tides and Manu happening at the same time is also helping in that regard, because the way those contracts get set up is you earn a certain portion for the delivery of the pencils or the delivery of the inks. And what really, I think, made Tides a very unique situation is, for the first time, Erwan Kensington is publishing an illustrated adult work, and the author and illustrator is both the same person. So the contract had to be very specifically crafted to account for deliverables and a timeline that said, okay, manuscript gets this, thumbnails for all the interior illustrations by this date. And, so we're spacing out the delivery timeline in such a way that I am not going to be famining.
Thank goodness. But
Yeah.
Wow. Was it your brainchild to bring that to them and say, I want to do both of these things, or did they come to you?
So a little bit of both. When I was first conceiving this story, I knew I wanted it to, like, the final product of it to feel like you were getting a book from that time period, because, back then they weren't discriminating, like, only children get illustrated books or only adults get illustrated books. If it was a book, it was often illustrated. And so I was like, if I'm going to be writing this book that takes place in 1911, I want it to feel like when you buy it from the bookstore, like you're purchasing something of that time. And so all of the interior illustrations will be like that lithograph pen and ink treatment. And so I brought this to my agent's attention, and, we had a sort of pragmatic conversation. She's like, okay, here's the thing, Venessa. It is very rare. And I knew this previously, but, in this context, it felt a little different, that most publishing companies, they will have the author and they will assign an illustrator from whatever, pool of talent they happen to have. And so authors don't tend to have that kind of control over their own work. Famously, I hate to keep bringing this woman's name up, but J.K. Rowling wanted to illustrate her own books and was denied
told
that.
Her no. Yeah.
And so my agent was like, I want you to be prepared for that eventuality. So maybe we go out with just the manuscript first, and then we sneak in like... the back end will be like, oh, and by the way, she wants to illustrate it.
All right, one more quick break. Hang on a second. All right, here's the rest of the episode.
At the very last moment, my agent was like, you know what? Let's go all in. How quickly can you put together a cover mock-up? How quickly can you put together like some mock-up interior? I was like, oh my God, when do you want to send this out? She's like, next week. I was like, okay. So
in about 5 minutes.
Exactly. So I spent all weekend. I put together like a super quick, cover, and I put together at that point charcoals because pen and ink is so much more precise, and I didn't want to give anything sloppy over, so I gave them charcoals, and this is how I knew. I was like, the universe was spotting me for this, because the manuscript was out in February, and I was told not to expect anything, like any bites, by like May, because it was a chunky book. Like, it's a historical fiction, and there's world building in that. And at the time, it was roughly like 119,000 words. So she's like, I don't expect anything quick on this. But 2 weeks later, wow, my now editor from Erewhon was like, I need this book. How quickly can we have a meeting? And at the meeting, she's like, okay, just give me your vision. What do you see for this, final product? And I was like, all right, well, since you're asking. And I laid it all out the way I just laid it out to you guys here. It was like, my hope is that this can also be a way to reintroduce adult illustrated works. We're like one of the only countries, really, the Western publishing world is very much like, if it's adult, no illustrations. But if you go to, Southeast Asia or China or Japan, those adult books are all illustrated. And there's, I've got some. If you want to see them later. But, they don't have that quibble. And part of the reason that they don't have that issue, I think, is because their culture surrounding illustrated works is not like ours. So, and of course, there's the business of, all of our American books tend to be printed off of 2 printers in China. And that's resources that, it tends to cost a lot more to have illustrated works printed.
Images.
Yeah,
yep.
Exactly.
Yep.
Especially when you consider like paper quality and whatever. But so for Tides, keeping it monochromatic and ink, we can get away with it. But yeah, so I laid out all the cards on the table, and I was like, so what do you think? And she's like, I think we can do this. And she's like, just hang tight for a bit. And then she brought in the art director, and it became this like team focused thing of like, how can we make this book like seriously cool? Like, you're going to want to get
special.
you're going to want to hold the physical copy in your hand. And from that conversation, we talked about end papers. We talked about having like full color inserts, and, do we want to mess with the size of the book? Do we want to have certain portions of the book written in a different ink or a different typeset to reflect the merman's POV and things like that? So I give all the props to, Diana Foe and the crew at Erewhon, because this is a risk. This is like, they are putting a lot of production resources toward this book, and it's
so
just
exciting.
It's an absolute dream come true. What they're doing for me is insane.
Well, you've earned it. I mean, you've really earned it, and it's exciting. And there's no part of me that thinks this is a risk. This is going to blow it out of the water. You have you have your own fan following. So that is exciting. And I suppose I would really just like to just talk to you until we all fall asleep. But, we can't do that. So this seems like a really great time to let folks know how they can connect with you. You'd mentioned Patreon, you'd mentioned Etsy. What are the ways they can follow all of this and connect with you and support you and all that good stuff?
Well, I guess the easiest way to connect is like Instagram, and on my other socials. My Instagram handle is the same as my Tumblr handle. It's VKelleyArt. My Twitter is VScrivanoKelley, which is probably a little harder to remember. But yeah, if you type in like V Kelley art, you'll generally find me all over the place. So yeah, and my website is VenessaKelley.com, BE, in case people are like, gosh, why does her name have so many E's in it? It doesn't make any sense. I can't find my name on a single coffee cup ever.
in your first name and your last name.
You can't find mine either, spelled correctly.
Yeah.
I hear you.
Funny.
Heather, no problem.
Exactly.
Your name's all over license plates and coffee.
It's everywhere.
Keychains, you're set.
Despite the fact that it is like on the list of the least popular names of all time ever, except for within the 2 years, I'm a 74 baby. Within the 2 years of me being born, it was like on the most popular name list. And other than that, always at the bottom list. Mm-hmm.
That's fascinating. Because my best friend's name is Heather.
There you go.
I always thought it was
popular. Least popular.
Yeah. You know what's funny about
he doesn't believe me. He's Googling it.
No, I want to look at the least popular girls. Let's see. Least popular name of 2023. Yvonne, Venetia, Tracy, Tony, Thelma, Tasman, Shirley, Sheila.
Venetia.
Maybe you could use that in your next book.
I know.
Repopulate it.
Here's some of the most notable unique celebrity names in recent years. Cosmo Thunder, Jupiter, Psalm, spelled P-S-A-L-M.
Well, that's a Kardashian West baby.
Maybelline, Heart,
Maybelline?
Sir, and yep.
That kid came
Heart,
out the
Sir,
womb and was like, I'm worth it. Or
Maybelline.
is that CoverGirl? I don't know.
Maybe it's Maybelline.
Maybe it's Maybelline.
Maybe it's whatever. Maybe it's Maybelline.
Yeah.
No.
What's the baby's name?
That's
Maybe it's
amazing.
Maybelline.
It's funny because my 10-year-old and I were talking about unusual, unique names last night. She's like, she was asking me specifically about Kim Kardashian's kids' names. And she's like, why do you think they picked those? And she goes, do you think when they're old enough and they're going to change their names?
Oh my gosh. Isn't that
I
the
said,
question?
no, because they have a celebrityness attached to their names. And she goes, well, but they could change them. And I'm like, yeah, well, but if you're famous just because you got born and that's your name.
Right.
I mean, it stands to reason if the person wants to be anonymous, then
correct.
Then maybe that's, the option they'll take.
Yeah. Yeah. If you no longer want to be Chicago West, then you can.
Oh my gosh.
Northwest East.
No hate. Yep. Like whatever. Everybody should love their names. All of that. Amazing. Venessa, this was so cool. I don't know. It was really fun to hear you talk about your journey and your story. And
this has been a blast for me as well. Thank you both so much.
Thank you so much. I'm putting my hat in the ring to be part of the promo team for both of your books. If you'll let me, let's go.
That would be amazing. Y'all will get some arcs.
Yay! I'm pretty excited about it.
I'm very
excited. Thank you.
I don't know what you signed up for, but I'm in. Let's do it.
Yes,
you know what an
arcs are advanced reader copies.
An arc.
Yep. So that's the book that goes out before the actual book goes out.
Can I get a dark?
I was like, wait, can we get a signed arc? Can we do that?
Yeah. I want a digital arc, a dark.
Oh, yes, those are possible. But I will say it will not.
I want a print version and I want a signature. I'm going all in. It can go on my wall of fame over here, which is this on this side features your art. Actually, I think almost all of the books over there. I'm missing a couple of them. And then on this side are books by people that I know that are signed. But you'll make the pretty shelf.
Oh, thank you. I'm honored, truly.
So are we. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
The pleasure was all mine.
So, how much did you just fangirl out in that interview?
So much. There's so much fangirling out. I mean, I didn't even get to, because it would have been inappropriate to be like, can you tell me about that first conversation you had with Casey McQuiston? Or what was it like when TJ Klune reached out and said, do my custom, I don't know. I mean, these are people that create worlds that, much like Venessa said, like, work is heavy, life is heavy. I'm going to read something that brings me joy and just step into that space. That I do that. And I have my mug right here, emotionally attached to fictional characters. I get very invested. And somehow Venessa takes those stories and creates this beautiful visual world, and she's so talented. I fangirled out so hard. I didn't make too much of an ass out of myself, did I?
No, not too much. Just a slight ass.
And that's just be par for the course then. Par for the course.
Yeah. You were awake, so you were at least a semi ass. Let's see. No, I love this. Like the arts world outside of the theater and the Broadway space is all still so new to me. It's fascinating, and I mean, really, I love that. I love people like her that are this kind of one-stop shop where they're just like, I can see the big picture. Not only can I see it, I can create it. So she's writing down, she's creating the story, she's writing it down, she's developing these characters, and then she's making them real. And it's fascinating, just fascinating to me how people like her can how they operate. It's amazing.
Yeah. It's so cool. And I love that she said, bless the mistakes, right? Like there were moments where she felt like, God, I've wasted so much time. And now she's creating this original work that is fully developed because of what she was doing before. So there is no wasted time, right? That reminder.
It all feeds into what you're doing. I mean, if you've got a shit ass side job and you're trying to create art, use your shit ass side job as inspiration.
Even if that shit ass side job is paying you a lot of money, right? Like, yeah.
I mean, something just to incorporate it. But yeah, you're right. I mean, everything, like time to the government, time to the military, and I mean, it gave her the stepping stones, personality-wise, experience-wise, to like push her where she needs to go. And in hindsight, it's like, oh yeah, that's a natural progression. What I did was totally fit my needs. But in the moment, you're like freaked out. That's why I asked her. I was like, what was the biggest? I don't know how I phrased it. The biggest oh shit moment or whatever it was, where it was like, this is the biggest chance I'm about to take, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. And you know what else? I didn't really dig in with it because it didn't feel appropriate, but I really love that she said it wasn't until she was in her late 30s that she began to untangle her identity and to embrace her queer identity. And she's used that journey in her books as well. And as somebody who also didn't embrace my queer identity until I was in my late 30s. Like that's a whole nother side conversation, but we're so nuanced as people. There are so many layers and levels to us. And when we talk about taking intentional risk for any kind of success, but especially a creative success, and in her case, we're literally talking about creating art. I have this conversation with people all the time about the show. Like, oh, well, I'm not an artist, so I don't need to listen to the podcast. And we're like, that's totally not prerequisite. Creative success is being successfully creative, creating what you want,
maybe
building
we should
what you want.
Just creating success.
Creating success.
Creating emotional, creating fulfilling success, creating, I don't know. We'll workshop it.
We can workshop it. Do you guys want us to change it? Yeah.
No, I don't want to change it. I like it.
But, you know, all of these different layers of us and embracing that as it shows up, which is embracing chance. Was it chance? Like, okay, now here this is. What am I going to do with it? And using it to our advantage.
Rock on. Well, tell us what you think. How can they find us? Old common name
so
Heather.
Easy to fuck. Old common name Heather.
Common name McGee. Common
Y'all are pretty
face.
easy to find. We are on Instagram at Was It Chance. You can find us on the web, wasitchance.com. You can email us, wasitchancepodcast@gmail.com.
Gmail.
It's the only one that has the podcast in it.
Yep.
In fact, I gave Venessa the wrong email address when I was like, hey, send over your pictures and your bios, and I fucked that up. But
cool story, bro.
We fixed it. Okay. You can just edit that part out then. Jackass. We're super easy to find. We want to hear what you are loving, how you are embracing chance. Also, if there's somebody you think would be great on the show, let us know. We'll see if we can get him on. I think that'd be fun. I've been asking that question on Threads a lot. Like, who do you want to hear from?
Guillermo del Toro.
Okay, make that happen for us.
J.J. Abrams.
Can you do
Shelley
that?
Williams. I actually want Shelley Williams, director of The Wiz.
I got a
The Wiz
guy
revival.
who knows the Broadway industry a little bit.
Who
and maybe
dat?
he can help us. Yes, come and hang out.
You've been listening to Was It Chance, the podcast about embracing opportunity and taking risks for your creative life. Workshopping it. We'll try something else. Hold on. Let me try. Taking risks for your successful life. Creating risks for your lifestyle life. Nope. Creating risk. Anyway, you get the idea. Find us next time.
Bye, guys. This is Heather.
Oh, this is Alan.
Yeah, we'll see you later.
This is Alan. I'll edit that in the right place because caught me off guard. All right.